Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Energize with Bram podcast. And this podcast is specifically made for your business leaders, whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or an executive, and especially also the proactive people that always are looking for ways to grow their mindset, grow their skill set, and also become the best version of them. So, if this is you, welcome to the podcast. Joining us today is Karin van Zuilen. She is a Dutchie currently in Holland, the Netherlands, where they celebrated King's Day. The good news is also that she is a global leader. She has made Malaysia her home. We actually met each other in Langkawi, the beautiful coastline of Malaysia. And hey, Karin, so great to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for making yourself available.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
It's a pleasure. As we had this beautiful catch up, sitting next to the pool with a glass of wine after a long day, or actually several long days that we had at a retreat for internet mastery, it really struck me that you have a story to share that is valuable for business leaders there. But before we go there, could you just get us quickly up to speed with the sort of background you have? Quickly go through some of the professions you've held. And then before you go to what you're doing today, that's where we're going to stop.
Sure. Yeah, well, it can be a long story, but let me say there are different parts of me. By training, I'm a pharmacist. So I like all the things like math and chemistry and things like that. I love to see how drugs work in the body and how our body works, how our mind works. And talking about mind, that's the other thing, because I'm also a holistic psychotherapist. So that's something completely different. On top of that, I'm a marketeer. So these are the three things that I'm combining in work. How I got started was in the pharmaceutical industry. So I used to work there for 25, 30
Oh,
years, very long.
and
Yeah, all
obviously,
kind of marketing and sales positions, but I was global marketing director for a long time
yeah,
in big pharma.
beautiful. And I love how you went on the three main buckets that you covered, being a pharmacist, a marketer, and then also a psychotherapist. What a great combination, from the detail, the nitty-gritty of the facts and figures and numbers and really black and white to something which is a lot more warm and fuzzy, people and the likes. And then marketing and selling, I really appreciate that sort of holistic background. So obviously, you have a long career in the field of pharmacy, which is big business. Last position you held was as what exactly?
As a global marketing director, think about brands. Like, how can we really make them valuable to the patients? How can we really make a difference there? Working globally, yeah, I went to Australia, New Zealand, but also Asia, the Middle East, the Americas, and of course, Europe. I was working for a Japanese company, and their headquarters were based in the Netherlands, which is very special. But they actually really understood that they couldn't do this kind of business from Japan.
Wow.
So I was working with so many different people, setting up affiliates all over the world, but also working with distributors. And I don't know whether you have been working with distributors in your life, but of course they have their own ideas, what
Yep.
they actually want to do.
Yep.
So they have their own mindset. They have like a whole bunch of products that they want to bring to the market. And there you come, right? You want them to sell your products. So how do you do that?
Yes, I
So
perfectly know what you talk about because I definitely have also worked with a lot of distributors, local as well as national ones, and some of them were international. So it's not always easy. I call it the difference between you don't have necessarily authority over them. So it's not a matter of hard power. You've got soft power. You try to influence them and create buy-in rather than persuade them through hierarchy or hire and fire sort of power. But hey, great
exactly.
background. That must have been a big gig, very well rewarded financially speaking. What then suddenly made you decide to leave the corporate cushions with all the perks that involved and then suddenly go out on your own?
What happened all the time when I was traveling, I was sitting next to people in the plane or sometimes on a bus, even walking down the street, and people always got to me with their life stories. So they always got to me saying, what happened today? What happened last week? What happened in their lives? So I was like, I want to do something with that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know what it is. I still have that people just open up to me and I hear their whole life stories and all the things they're dealing with and struggling with. And that also goes with teams and companies. It seems like I have something that I need to bring to the world. So then I started to also study psychotherapy because at that time I hadn't done that yet. So I could really help them. I was indeed in a very comfortable position. Everybody knew me in the pharma industry. You feel comfortable.
Absolutely.
So it's actually quite a decision, just like what you highlighted.
So what was the catalyst? Like,
Well, what I always tell people and leaders and anyone around me, it's like your environment actually brings you all this stuff. And then in the end, you can't do anything else but taking the next step. So if you really look closely at what's happening around you, it's just a very natural decision. In the end, it's not like thinking and making Excel sheets and seeing like what's the best option or something like that. It's just like that everything comes together. So I did these studies in the weekends. I was giving workshops for psychotherapy. I saw individual clients, but meanwhile I was doing my job. Then at my job, all kind of things were happening where I felt like, do I still want this? I also had a colleague who wanted to start an own company. So basically, all these roads, they just come together and always try to do that with others as well, to recognize what's going on in your life, what's going on around you. And then you can see where it brings you.
I definitely resonate with your story. I remember one of them that you shared very openly about a challenging situation that you navigated as a leader, where another leader was brought in, got really dicey. I would imagine that definitely would have been part of the catalyst as well, like one of the roads that kind of led to the next step. Could you walk us through this? And particularly, what I would like to hear is the lessons when somebody comes into a leadership team and has a certain style of leading, the effects it has. And knowing what you now know, what you would have done differently, potentially about the situation. If you could just walk us through that situation there, please.
You were actually talking about a different situation, a later stage of my life. But when I took the decision to actually start Senz, which is my company, the leader at the time, I felt he was not very capable of doing what he was doing. So that's always very interesting, right? So, how do you deal with that? Do you want to deal with that? And what I'm always asking myself and others is there are always two options. Do you want to continue doing that? Do you want to continue having this kind of interaction and deal with that? Or do you feel like it's bringing you to a next stage? So he can keep doing what he wants. And I can keep doing what I want. I can learn from it.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and what would I have done differently? I would say, like, maybe knowing what I know right now, that I would step more into his shoes to really feel what drives him rather than just accusing him of not doing the right stuff. So, more like triggering the good things inside of him.
That's
Yeah.
an interesting observation. And I think it's a perfect segue into one of the models that you work with around leaders and their shadow side and the different type of leaders we can be. I'd love to hear you share this with the rest, like how that model is really helpful to see how you can perform better as a leader.
Yeah, I really love this model. And I use it all the time wherever I am. So I really want to bring this to the world. It's not about the model, of course, but it's really like if people know their own pattern, then everything changes. You know why you're doing what you're doing, and you can choose to do it differently. So, how beautiful is that? And there's so many people who are just stuck in unproductive, not happy, destructive patterns. What if it were possible to change that? So, and that's where this model comes in. And maybe it would be nice, Bram, I don't know whether you're open to it, that we work with that together. So that I ask you a few questions and we see how it unfolds.
I would be delighted.
Okay. So, where I think the most powerful way, there are different ways to work around this model, but basically it's a quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it has four different elements.
Mm-hmm.
So, where I love to start, the most powerful one is with the triggers. So, there's certain situations and people or people who are triggering you.
Mm-hmm.
So where you are actually behaving at your worst. So, worst case scenario, something happens and you're like, her. So, some people would get aggressive, but
Yeah.
some people actually would be like, I'm not there anymore. Different reactions, but it actually evokes something in you that is not, let's say, that makes you feel emotions that you rather don't feel.
And so the question is what it is and how I respond?
The question is, can you describe that kind of behavior this people show
Yeah.
that triggers you?
Thank you for clarifying. My perception would be of somebody who comes in and just wants to do something their way. They're not open to what I have to bring to the table or other
Yeah.
people. It's just their way is the highway, and there is no negotiating whatsoever, no wiggle room, no inclusion. Then I start seeing it as being unfair, that they're bullies, dominant, very controlling, and not willing to collaborate and create a win-win situation. That would
I
really
see.
trip me up, and I could get aggressive in a moment like that.
So what you're saying is my way is the highway would be trigger kind of like the feeling of being bullied, and
Pretty much.
that's someone who's controlling
Yeah.
basically the situation.
Yep. Absolutely.
That doesn't feel good to you, right? So, okay, let's say that's your trigger,
Mm.
right? Let's start from there. So now let's go to the next quadrant. Now let's take the positive opposite of this trigger.
Yep.
So, what would be the positive opposite of my way is the highway? What would be the positive opposite of this bullying, controlling person?
Somebody who's collaborative and well, the best one basically as an opposite would be somebody who's hugely collaborative and win-win oriented.
Yeah, exactly. Win-win. Yeah, and collaborative. Exactly. Sometimes it's hard for people to find the right words, but you are, I think, spot on immediately on what that could mean.
There.
So that is actually your strength. So the interesting thing is, if you find out what your trigger is, then you can find the positive opposite of that. And that is your strength. Is that true, Bram?
Absolutely.
Collaborative, win-win person.
Yeah. And I do know that I also have the other side at times as well, which I'm very mindful
Haha. You're already disclosing part of the model.
of. It's an interesting model.
Yeah. So, okay. So that is like if you go from your trigger to your strength. But now, there are also things that people don't like in you. I can hardly imagine, of course, Ram, but maybe there are people who feel like, oh my gosh, no, Bram, why are you doing this again?
Oh yeah,
Or that you feel yourself like, okay, I'm dealing with these people and I'm like, oh, I'm doing this again.
sure. So I imagine that there's a few sides probably. One would be for some people's liking, I think I might come across as too optimistic and too much shall be all right, or we'll give it a crack and it'll work out. I think some people would say, hey, are you realistic, Bram? That would be one where they would question me on that. Another one probably would be one that I've learned to deal with much better, which is getting my excitement, my bubbly personality, being more measured around people where that highly excitable factor of mine could actually push people away. And I think I've been very mindful of that probably for about 12 years now, that I adapt more to the people that I'm with rather than imposing it on people.
So people would say like you're kind of like opportunistic as well, so that you take your chances, and being so optimistic, you see chances everywhere, so that you lose like the more realistic side of
Oh,
things,
yes.
right?
Yeah. Some people would think that there's reasons to challenge me in my assumptions that something can be done, and they would challenge me on that and say, hey, are you realistic about this? This is something that I have, and I'm very persistent and tenacious in whatever I do, if it's important enough. So at times, it could seem foolish or very risky what I do to some people.
Exactly. Can you imagine that that bothers them?
Oh, absolutely, especially if you're my wife.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you.
So yes, my wife has had to put up with a lot of stuff and ideas and actions I've taken. And yeah, look, some of it worked, some of it didn't, or didn't work yet.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but that's usually what I'm telling people. And probably your wife is a bit more controlling. Am I right?
Credit to my wife, I think she's very supportive. She's not very controlling unless it's a matter that is really important to her. Like, for example, she's very much of a safety and security person, which
Yeah.
means as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
this is sometimes a bit tricky for her if my income is fluctuating based on the work I do and the value I render and then the service that I get paid for. So I don't have necessarily same paycheck, arrives the same day and time, and so on and so forth. And it fluctuates. For me, I'm okay with that. For her, that's more of a challenge. And that's where she becomes a little bit more controlling.
Yeah, because what I usually see is that people choose the partners from whom they can learn most. In your case, it's interesting to see that she's the one who takes care of the money, the safety, and diminishes the risk that you're taking.
She's my yin and yang. She balances me out. There's definitely need for that too.
Exactly. Okay, but let's continue with the model, because actually what you were saying is being too optimistic and not so realistic is actually your shadow side.
Mhm.
So, is it also possible that when I look at your strength, maybe you are just like giving yourself completely? You are just like all in
Oh yeah.
all the
Oh
time.
yeah.
So
Definitely.
that it's sometimes also a bit too much for you, that you're just so in people's situations, in everything, that you may tend to also forget about yourself, but that you're so much giving. Is that
It's
possible?
funny how you say that. I didn't really see it from that perspective, but I remember at my wedding day, my best man standing up, and he never said anything of that kind to me directly before, but he had a few beers and he was probably stressed of being in front of a lot of people with the microphone in his hand. He said to me, Bram, you were so intense before you got together with Andrea. And I was like, what do you mean I'm intense? What do you mean? And I think that's exactly what you say. So sometimes I probably go really in intensely, all in, as you say, which for some people might be a bit much.
Yeah. For some people, and maybe sometimes also for yourself. So if you give yourself so much, that's a lot.
I just want to give.
Yeah, exactly. You are definitely a giver.
Uh,
And how do I know that? It's because looking at the pyramid of you, I can see it. If you overdo your strengths, you actually get your shadow sides. So if you overdo collaboratively, your win win, that kind of behavior, you're really open to things, to people. So if you overdo that, that would be the shadow side.
So one is a strength and then it's the opposite. And then what's the other two then exactly?
Yeah. So we started with the trigger,
Yep.
which you can't stand in others, right?
Yep.
Then we said like, okay, the positive opposite of that is your strength.
Yep.
Yeah. So when we go from my ways to highway, we go to win-win. That is
Yep.
your strength, right? So and collaborative,
Yep.
that's your strength. So then if you overdo this strength, you get to your shadows.
Uh,
So, and that means like that yours can be like too much into it,
that's it.
that you're so much like one with anything what is happening around you, with the people, with situations. You just go into it. That is a shadow side.
Wow. So if we could take that now to leaders, we obviously used my example to illustrate the model. For a leader,
Yeah, we miss one side still. We have three sides now: your trigger, your strengths, and your shadow side. And it means that's a number four, actually, the most interesting one, because that's your hidden quality. And people don't show their hidden quality because of what has happened in their lives. And that's a very deep one. Sometimes I go that deep, sometimes I don't go that deep. But most of the time, people forget and don't dare to show anymore. This hidden quality is the number four quadrant of this model. And you can find it very easily by taking the positive opposite of your shadows. So if we look at your shadows being like all in, just like taking care of others, giving, being too optimistic. So what side are you hiding?
is it
What
receiving and being detached?
Yeah, detached is, it sounds a bit like negative. I would rather say taking care of yourself.
Okay.
So receiving,
When
taking
I said
care of
detached means
yourself.
being a bit more relaxed about things. Because really, in a way, sometimes by giving so much, in a way, it's a way to control.
Exactly. And I don't know whether this is the right moment to say, but it's something maybe for leaders and other people who are into this. A question I would ask when you look at these triggers: is there anything there that you recognize that people did to you before in your life and you never want to be like that? You decided, like, no, that's not going to be me. And if you decide that's not going to be me, I don't want to be this bully. I don't want to be this controlling person. And that means that you're also losing that part that is more taking care of itself, being more opinionated, being more relaxed about situations. You're actually not allowed yourself anymore to do that. So that is the, because if you overdo taking care of yourself, receiving, being opinionated, if you overdo that, you get your triggers again. So this is how this model goes around.
A lot. Thank you first of all for using me as a guinea pig here to actually
Yeah,
showcase the power of it and what it can look like for one person. This is obviously just an example. If we take now abstraction of this, because a lot of the work you do is now with leadership teams. When you work with a group of executives, multiple people in one team, by having done this work with them as a group, what changed? What were the outcomes?
if people don't know how much they matter, if teams don't know how much they matter, how they make a difference, then in the end, people just get busy, busy, busy. A lot of noise will be around. Silos are there in companies. People fight with each other. So that is usually when I'm called in. And
Crisis intervention sort of thing?
well, crisis, people don't describe it like that. So they say like we're growing, but yeah, there are different departments and they all have their own view on it. And when we're in the management team, it doesn't feel like we're all going into the same direction. So it could be much more efficient.
Misalignments, disagreements, seeing things
Exactly.
differently.
Yeah. And that they want to grow faster. They see we do have a strategy, but actually the layer under the management team, they're like, strategy, direction. What do you mean? So then the management team knows it, but the leadership team reporting to them, they actually don't. And it means the rest of the organization doesn't know either.
Yeah.
So how can you bring that all together and people feel like I want to belong? I really want to belong to this team, to this organization, and I can contribute something. And that's what I want to achieve with my programs, because what changes is everything. And it's not subtle. You can see that from the moment after the workshop. You can measure it, will be seen after a few weeks already. When people know who they are and how they contribute within their teams, they take ownership. They know actually what is the contribution of others, what is the added value of the others. They know their own. So they don't really need to fight anymore,
Yeah.
but they can cooperate as a team. So, how do you set your team apart from other teams, from other organizations? That is such a beautiful process,
Mm.
because then people are like, oh my gosh, there's so many pharma companies, consumer health companies, they're all selling drugs, they're all selling supplements, but they do business in a very different way compared to others. We all do that in our own way. If you know how much you matter, then you will wake up so passionate.
And
You will
passionate you are,
just like,
Karen. You
yeah,
literally told me in Langkawi how you're always doing something. Sitting still is just not part of your thing. You just want to always be doing things because you're so passionate. Yeah?
exactly. Yeah, my hidden quality is that I can sit still very well. I'm still learning, Bram.
What has been your learning lesson going through your own model as a leader to
Yeah,
better service other people out there?
I think I could have been really high in the pharma industry. I was once the number one person to become the general manager of the company. They didn't choose me in the end because I was far too emotional. They told me I'm very passionate. I'm very emotional for people who don't really like that.
Mm.
So I would say what I've learned is to use that, to be aware of it, that I have it. And in the moment that you're aware of it, that you're doing it, there's no need to overdo it anymore. So if you can just like be there and enjoy it, then it's fine. You rise through the pyramid. I teach them how from this quadrant you can actually go up to the inspired you. It means using your strength, but it also means what can you do? How can you just sit back when you feel you're going into your shadow side? And for me, that was getting over emotional. I've learned that I also have another quality. I can connect really well to people and that it's safe to connect to people. That's my hidden quality. That's one of the beautiful things that people can do, that they just start living these hidden qualities that they actually have. So yeah, that's my process. And there, of course, for me, there's also a reason why I was not connecting so much, but just being like overly enthusiastic and passionate and emotional, etc. My dad, he was very narcissistic, always taking care of himself. I learned not to focus on myself and that it's safer not to connect. That has been my journey.
Hey, I love this whole topic of self-awareness as part of leadership. And especially the model that you just described. By the way, what do you call that model?
It's called the pyramid of you.
The pyramid of you. That is a big one. I think we touched on a lot of things here. And for those people that are inspired to learn more about the type of work you do, where can I find you?
Oh, you can easily find me on LinkedIn. It's Karin van Zuilen. But
Yep.
I also have a website. It's Senz Strategy Consulting. Yeah,
Excellent.
I would love to work with global teams.
We'll make sure that those links are embedded as part of the video. Other than that, if there's one final thought that you would like to leave leaders with, what would it be?
Hmm, that's a good question. If things are happening in your, if you want to grow faster, if you're just like busy, take a step back and start finding your own strength, what you can actually bring to the world yourself. If you know what your patterns are like and you start shifting that and you start living your strength, that will change your environment as well. So I would say start with yourself.
Great. So you're basically saying if you notice that things aren't really going as fast as you thought it would, take a step back, go back to digging into what you might have hidden and turn that on. That's the idea. Eh?
Exactly.
It's been a pleasure, Karen. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll make sure that people find you online. For now, I would say goodbye. And for everybody listening in, thanks for joining us here. We appreciate you being part of the Energize with Bram podcast. For now, have a good one, and till next time.